We are here to honor our most generous benefactor and newest freshman, the man who's made it possible for us to break ground here today, Mr. Thornton Mellon.
Dean Martin, great speech, great speech. There's nothing like good, clean business, huh? And a little monkey business.
Oh, Philip, I'm so glad you could make it. Mr. Mellon, I'd like for you to meet Dr. Philip Barbet, who's the dean of our School of Business.
David, I just want to get it on record that I am totally against this. I don't think that selling admission to an obviously unqualified student is very ethical or honorable.
All right, Phil, but I'd just like to say, in all fairness to Mr. Mellon here, it was a really big check.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. We're heading into the long weekend with the end of ad-free August, and I wanted to share a few behind-the-scenes stories before next week when the show returns to its regular format. And I'm going to tell you who's coming up because I've already recorded a couple of those conversations, and I think you're going to like them. But first, thanks to those of you who have emailed and texted and posted on social media about the episodes we've done over the past few weeks. Seems like people enjoyed the conversations that Bill Barker, Chris Harris, and I had about money in movies, weighing in with suggestions of their own that we didn't really get into, like The Usual Suspects, Ocean's 11, The Man Who Would Be King, Kelly's Heroes, which I need to see if that is streaming somewhere because I haven't seen that movie in forever. Same with the conversations I had with Ross Anderson and Dan Maseka about money in music, people weighing in with their favorite songs on the topic. Shout out to my old friend Scott Burt up in Vermont with his mention of the Dire Straits song Love Over Gold. Here's the thing. When I interview someone on this show, just like a regular episode, I ask them the questions I want to ask them. I'm very intentional with these conversations. Rarely do I finish an interview and then sometime after that think to myself, oh, I should have asked them about X, Y, Z. But I got to say, after recording with Ross and Dan, talking about music and money, it seems like pretty much every other day, someone mentions a song or I hear a song and I think, oh, that would have been great to talk about, proving that there are just way too many good songs about money. This is the 30th episode of this podcast. When I started back in January, honestly, I was not positive I was going to make it this far. The reason there are so many podcasts is because it's really easy to start a podcast. And a huge number of podcasts out there only have a couple of episodes because people think, well, this will be fun. And they start without much of a plan. And then they discover that doing a podcast every week or 2 weeks or whatever schedule they set for themselves, turns out that takes time and energy and focus. I started podcasting in 2009. This was my full-time job until the middle of 2023. So I did not have any illusions about what it was going to be like. And it's a bigger challenge when you're flying solo as opposed to being part of a larger company. So I appreciate you listening and coming along with me as I have these conversations with people about money because it affects every one of us. And the more episodes you listen to, the more you hear people talking about struggles they've had at different points in their lives, lessons they've learned, some of them hard lessons. Others come with some amount of humor attached to them. And I'm hoping that you've had a few moments where you heard someone talking about money and their very human reactions to situations. Sometimes it's the joy of a first paycheck. Sometimes it's the relief that comes with getting out of debt. Sometimes it's the anxiety about feeling overwhelmed due to money problems. And I hope you've had the experience of identifying with them because you've had that same feeling or experience. And when that happens, you realize you're not alone. Unfortunately, one of the things money can do is make you feel alone. I swear I'm not trying to bring the mood down. Stick with me. This is going to get lighter in a minute, I promise. But that's one of the things I think can be helpful, is recognizing that even though we can sometimes carry financial stress with us, it helps to hear other people acknowledge they've had a similar challenge or even a bigger challenge. And then armed with that knowledge, our challenges become a little less daunting and we get that much closer to financial freedom. So let me get to the main point of today's episode, which is to share 3 behind-the-scenes stories, because stuff happens when I interview people. There are things that get left on the cutting room floor, and sometimes things happen outside the interview. Let me start with when I interviewed David Brancaccio. We recorded in the Marketplace Radio Studios in New York. David and I grew up in the same town in Maine. My oldest brother, Luke, was in the same graduating class as David. They've been friends for 50 years. In the episode, David talks about his first job in radio being at the local college station. He was the news guy. They needed someone to come in early on Saturday mornings to do news updates. And in the 1970s, college students were not known for getting up early on weekend mornings. That may, in fact, be the case now with college students. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, it was a great chance for David to be on the air. And this is when he was 13 years old. He's in middle school, and he's got a job on the college radio station. And you can go back and listen. David makes a joke about being on the air so young and his voice cracking at the age of 13. What he didn't tell me is something my brother told me after the episode came out, which is that pretty soon after he started doing this job, his voice dropped. Now, David Brancaccio has an all-time radio voice. I'm sure it's smoother now than when he was a teenager, but he has an all-time voice. What my brother told me was that after his voice dropped, some of the young women at the college started showing up at the radio station. Again, this is the 1970s. There's no social media. Students are actually listening to the radio. And apparently, some of the young women at the college heard the weekend news guy with the smooth, deep voice, decided to pop by the station to see if they could meet him. Which one of our college classmates has this amazing voice? And it turned out the smooth, deep voice belonged to a 14-year-old kid from the local town. Fantastic. By the way, speaking of my brother Luke, I want to give him a quick shout out because on the first music episode with Ross and Dan, I told a story about James Taylor combining 3 partial songs to finish his album so he could get paid. I got that story from my brother's blog. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. The blog is called Mass Commons, and 95% of what he writes about is music. Every day he posts a song and writes up a couple of paragraphs about it, background on the artist or the song. And he's done this for well over a decade. So he's written about thousands of songs of all types: rock and roll, jazz, blues, classical, country, hip hop, R&B. And if you're a fan of music, check it out. Even if you just want to go to the blog and go to the search box, type in the name of your favorite band or artist, you can see what he's written about them. It's a very entertaining blog. All right, second story. When I sat down with best-selling author Dan Pink, and I asked him about the last thing he splurged on just for himself, he pulled out his phone and he showed me the item that he bought on eBay, and it was going to be delivered later that day. It was a popcorn bucket shaped like a Zamboni, and it featured the logo of the pro hockey team, the Las Vegas Golden Knights. As you can hear in the episode, Dan is very happy with this purchase. I think it cost him $27 on eBay, proving, by the way, that you don't need to spend a lot of money to make something a splurge. So then, as the episode wraps up, Dan shares his final bit of life advice, and the episode ends. And Dan is such a smart guy and a deep thinker, and the wisdom that he shares at the end is fantastic. But in real time, I'm sitting across the table from him and I'm still thinking about the popcorn bucket. And I still have the audio of me asking Dan, so do all of them do this? And Dan says, do all of them do what? And I said, do all of the NHL teams have a popcorn bucket? And Dan cuts me off, does not let me finish the question, and he yells, no, they don't. Only the Golden Knights do. I would much rather have a Washington Capitals Zamboni popcorn bucket, but the Capitals are not enlightened enough to have that promotion. It was the loudest and most energetic Dan was during the entire conversation. If I ever have an episode that's like DVD extras, bonus cuts that didn't make it into the episode, that exchange is absolutely going in there. And, you know, we're about 6 weeks away from the start of the NHL season. So if anyone from the Washington Capitals, or for that matter, any other NHL team is listening, get on the promotional Zamboni-shaped popcorn bucket. Get that happening. Real quick, I mentioned before I would tell you what's coming up in the next few weeks, or rather, who is coming in the next few weeks. Nick Majuli from Ritholtz Wealth Management, author of the recent New York Times bestselling book, The Wealth Ladder. Had a great conversation with Nick. Also, Jill Schlesinger, award-winning business analyst for CBS News. She is host of the very popular Jill on Money podcast. Enjoyed that as well. And David Gardner, co-founder of The Motley Fool. His new book, Rule Breaker Investing, comes out September 16th. I've read it. It's great. It's not surprising, but it's great. So yeah, that's who's coming up in the near future. All right, third and final behind-the-scenes story. And you can let me know, but I feel like I saved the best for last. Earlier this year, I flew to Atlanta to interview Clark Howard, who is on my and most anyone's short list of the most important personal finance experts of the last 30 years. I land, I get an Uber to the downtown big radio and TV news station in Atlanta, and I meet up with Clark. He is a very upbeat, conversational guy, so I'm setting up the equipment and we're chatting about our kids and typical stuff. He offers me something to drink and I ask for water. He gets me some water, and then he walks over to a fridge and he pulls out a Diet Pepsi. Now again, we're in Atlanta, the home of Coca-Cola. And I said something like, Clark, I didn't know that Pepsi was even allowed in this city. And he just sort of laughed and said, last time I went to the store, this was on sale. And that right there is Clark Howard in a nutshell. That is his North Star. The guy loves a deal. He spent his professional life helping people find deals, helping people not get ripped off. It is in his DNA. So we have a great conversation. And then he said, hey, do you have a minute? Let me show you around the station. He starts introducing me to people. It's like he's the mayor of the station. By now, it's early afternoon, like 12:30, 1 o'clock. He says, how long are you in town for? And I said, oh, I'm heading right back. I'm supposed to fly back tonight, but I think I'm going to go to the airport and see if I can get on an earlier flight. And he says, do you have a car? And I said, no, I'm just going to get an Uber. And his mood changes. And he says, what? No, don't get an Uber. I'll drive you. And immediately I'm like, no, Clark, that's really nice. You don't have to do that. And there are two things worth pointing out here. The first is that the airport in Atlanta is south of the downtown area where we are. Clark lives north of the downtown area. So this is not a situation where he can say with a straight face like, oh, it's on my way home. No, it's not. It's the opposite direction of where he's heading. And the second thing is, while we are having this conversation, a torrential rainstorm is hitting the greater Atlanta area. So also, it's not like it's a great day for a drive. But the idea that I would be spending money on an Uber offended Clark Howard's thrifty sensibilities so much, he will not take no for an answer. So we go to the garage, we get in his car, we start driving to the airport. And I think this fact came up on the episode, but before he became a personal finance expert, Clark's first business was that he owned a bunch of travel agencies in the 80s and 90s before he sold them. So of all the deals that Clark loves to find, travel deals are the closest to his heart. So we're driving to the airport in this downpour, and he's focused. He's got both hands on the wheel. He's looking straight ahead, but he starts asking me questions about my flight. What time's your flight? 7 o'clock. What airline are you flying? Southwest Airlines. Do you have the Southwest Airlines app on your phone? Yes, I do. Oh, good. You can change your flight on the app. And at this point, I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm going to be at the airport for hours, so I'm just going to go up to the desk and talk to a human being. But Clark is such an expert in travel deals. He has all the apps. He knows all the features. And as he is driving through this rainstorm, he starts talking me through the steps. He's like, okay, open up the app, and now in the upper right-hand corner, hit that menu, and then you're going to go to this feature, and now hit that button, and it's going to give you options for other flights. And he's walking me through step by step, and I found a flight at 3 o'clock. I successfully rebooked myself on the app, and then I get a message from Southwest Airlines on the app informing me that because the 3 o'clock flight was cheaper than my evening flight, the airline is giving me a refund of $71. When I told Clark this news, he starts pounding the steering wheel and shouting with glee. Again, he was in a good mood the entire time we were together, but that was the moment he was the happiest. He would not have been that happy if he had gotten the $71. So we get to the airport, he gets out of the car, pops the trunk, and hands me my bag like he's my Uber driver. And he could not have looked any happier. If you are traveling this weekend, I hope you are safe and that your travels are smooth. Thank you again for listening. If you have any questions, drop an email to info@moneyunpluggedpod.com. If you're enjoying the show, please tell a friend. I'll see you next week.